The next person to speak will be Alison Moore.
This work, I'm going to stand up because you. Okay, can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay, well, I'm going to start by saying actually the Conservatives and Councillor Cornelius often portray my opposition to One Barnet as an ideological agenda, that public sector is good and the private sector is bad. And that really does not do justice to the concerns I and my colleagues have. On December 6th, the Conservative Council will make the first of two critical decisions to sell off the running of 70% of council services to one of two huge multinational companies. Customer care, finance, procurement, human resources, IT, revenues and benefits, I think people will notice if they do not work properly. And the council estates will be controlled by a chosen private contractor for the next 10 years. Early next year, they will award another contract to deliver development and regulatory services, planning, a whole range of statutory services. I'm concerned about this for the following reasons. The first is that, frankly, in the process, there's been little or no transparency, and the process has been mired. We've used secrecy, but actually obfuscation might be more appropriate. Democratic scrutiny of the proposals by elected members in public has been thwarted and curtailed. It took 2 years to agree a dedicated One Barnet scrutiny committee, and that lasted less than a year, met a handful of times before it was scrapped, and then now is tagged on to the Budget and Performance Scrutiny Committee, where, in honesty, there's little time with a packed agenda to really do justice, to scrutinise and challenge the One Barnet items as I think they deserve to be challenged and scrutinised. There's been no meaningful consultation with local residents about the One Barnet programme, and in my view, it's something that affects every resident across the borough. It's a fundamental change in the way we deliver local services, and I think local people really should be consulted about it. There was no robust business case. When we were considering the options for future delivery, right at the options appraisal stage, the in-house model and in-house services were completely dismissed as an option. The Conservatives were only interested in some form of privatisation, and I have challenged the Cabinet member subsequently on that, and he is quite clear about his predilection for the private sector in this. My concern is not that public sector is good and private sector is bad, but the in-house option was never properly assessed. A public sector comparative was not undertaken. So honestly, it's not clear whether privatising the services really will present best value compared with the public sector. The case at that point just was not properly made. There will be little flexibility in the contracts, and budgets will be fixed for 10 years. So much could change, and we've already seen 10 years ago the issue of the Catalyst contract, where frankly market forces did change after that contract was let, and we got our fingers burnt, and I think we need to learn from that lesson. We know that there are greater cuts coming from central government, another 28%, very possibly. And as those cuts fall, they will fall harder on the services that remain, and on children and adult social care, among others. Let's be serious, if things go wrong, there may be a huge bill that the Barnet taxpayers will pick up. Risk is never really passed on to the private sector when services are outsourced. You need to look at East Coast Mainline, the G4S fiascos. It is the taxpayer who paid the bill at the end of the day. And let's be honest, Barnet has not had the best record in procurement over recent years. We've seen everything locally from the Metro scandal to the Aerodrome Road Bridge. But actually, you only need to look wider and the West Coast Mainline story to see that actually it's about poor procurement processes, and in the end, it is the taxpayer who pays. How much control will you have over fees and charges? I think when you look at it, the savings are relatively, and they're large sums, but they're modest when you consider the risks. You're looking at 26 million in one package and 41 million in the other over 10 years. But the risk, and the money at risk, is £1 billion worth of services. We've already looked at problems with outsourced contracts. The street lighting PFI was underfunded. We've had serious parking, the parking service is already in trouble and has had to have a recovery plan put in place. The housing repair service cannot cost the council £1.5 million, and I've mentioned Catalyst already. So Other local councillors have already encountered problems with their large-scale outsourcing services, much, much bigger than that list I just made. Somerset Council is being sued by its private partner. Cornwall has halted its outsourcing. Edinburgh Council stopped a major privatisation.
Excuse me, there are people out here queuing to come in. How can we arrange to... Because we can't hear what you're saying.
Down here.
Well, can we organise ourselves that we can all come and hear you?
At the end of the speech, lady.
At the end of the speech.
At the end of the speech.
All right, then. Well, at the end of this speech, apparently.
There are problems aplenty across the country, but actually Barnet is proceeding on regardless, and with apparently no plan B. Now, if you started from if you had a different set of principles, you could do a very different job in terms of providing 21st century services, but from where we are right now, there are things you could do differently. You could cut the spend on consultants and agency staff. You could... vested in local services to increase income and trading, and I acknowledge that Richard Cornelius mentioned that, but there is the general power of competence. We could look at a whole range of innovations. We could look seriously at in-house service transformation, and I don't think that's been given serious consideration, and I think we need to look up until this last week, when out of the blue we ended up with the Waste and Street Services coming back in. And I think that's a really strong argument for looking at things differently and looking at these two projects differently. Where in-house transformation will not produce a better and cheaper service when it's tested properly, we ought to undertake proper options appraisals at the other options and make sure they cut the mustard. Most importantly, we should consult and engage with local residents about the services they want. But there are other authorities who've done it differently, and it would be possible, even at this late stage, to pause, challenge if it doesn't add up, stop the mass outsourcing, and move forward in a different way. Yes, it would be complicated. Yes, it would require a recasting of the budget, but there are too many unanswered questions, too many uncertainties. And the truth is, no one knows whether One Barnet will deliver better or cheaper services, because it's completely untried and untested on this scale. And in the case of development and regulatory services, these haven't been outsourced before in this package. It's huge, and I think we need to think again.